Peoples of the worldwide federated internets. What is good? Let's have a conversation about this. So I've been thinking a lot about this issue that's been being discussed the past 4 or 5 days about defunding the police, defunding the police. It's going on a lot. There's some people excited about it. There's some people on the fence about it. And there's some people that are just indifferent. I have some thoughts on it. I've been thinking about it a lot, going over some Bible verses, and I've went over these verses before, but I want to go over these verses again. And I'll start with this. I understand that not everyone who listens to me believes the Bible. I get it. You don't believe the Bible. I'm going to quote these verses. I'm going to go over my thoughts for the believers. Maybe you get something out of it. For the people who don't believe, maybe you get nothing. But I do have some comments to say after this that might be helpful. So let's get into this. In the book of Romans, chapter 13, I'll start at verse 1. And we'll see how far I go down. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God. And they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is not a minister of God to thee for good, but if thou do that which is evil, be afraid. For he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Wherefore ye must needs be subject, not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake. For this cause pay ye tribute also. For they are God's ministers, attending continually upon this very thing. Now, as I said, I've been thinking about this a lot because a lot of people have been saying defund the police. There's a lot of believers that are on board defund the police, and I've been thinking, is that a position I can hold? Is that a position I can hold? There's some merit to it. There's definitely some merit to it. What do you replace the police with? Oh, a local police force. Okay, so the assumption is, there's a lot of assumptions, but the assumption is there will never be an evil person in this localized police force. Now, maybe that's true. Maybe there's some issues concerning a localized police force, a more community-based police force that I am missing. And if I am missing that, I am open for anybody to DM me, go over your points. Maybe there's something I'm missing. But what I thought about in the book of Romans, chapter 13, I think it was verse 4, it says, for he is a minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid. For he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. And I honestly think I believe that the line of thinking from that verse supports what I said some videos ago. I can't remember what video. I believe police officers need to be retrained completely. And I believe they need to be retrained not as right now police officers are nothing more than the way they're trained, in my opinion. Now I could be wrong, and I'm watching my words because I don't want to paint every police officer with a broad brush, because there are police officers out there that love their community, that honestly became police officers to serve their community. I believe the training is more geared toward pushing them to be state hired thugs. Now, that's not to disparage police officers, and that's not my point. So I want you to understand that. I do believe there are officers out there that love and want to serve their community, but the training is set up for them to be state hired thugs. And the reason I say that is the training is more, from what I've seen. I'm not a police officer. I've never been through police training. So if you're a police officer out there and you feel like I'm spreading something false, please feel free to send me a DM and explain to me your position. I am not infallible, but I believe the way police officers are trained, even if, okay, so let's say we defund the police. If we defund the police, what I'm saying still stands. The way officers are trained, whether it's a community based or whatever it is, needs to be different. An officer needs to be trained that here's the U.S. Constitution, here's some different laws and statutes. What we need to make sure is that we are protecting the rights of the people. And if anybody, whether it be an organization, whether it be a government entity or another individual, another citizen, violates the rights of a citizen, we need to step in at that point. But I believe that what the police force in the United States has become, and I've said this before, is they're more enforcers than they are protectors. And that's where the problem comes in. And that's what led me going over these verses again. I believe that these verses even support what I'm saying, as far as the police should be there to be more of a protector than an enforcer, right? Because if the idea of police is protect, then what's going to happen? They're going to patrol the neighborhood, do what they do, ride around in their car, and they're not looking to pull somebody over for a tail light that's out. It's not what they're looking for, right? They're not looking because, oh, this person has tint that's maybe a little too dark. We'll let that pass. That's really not something that we're gonna pull this guy over and give him a ticket because he has tint that's too dark, and that helps who? How? But if you see a situation where, hey, you know what? I just saw this guy cut this dude off. Okay, maybe, it was a mistake. Okay, now he's weaving in and out of traffic and he's cut 5, 6, 7 people off. He's going to cause an accident. That's when we probably need to intervene and see what's going on because this guy's going to hurt somebody. You don't go in a neighborhood. Let's say you're a beat cop, go in a neighborhood looking for who you can harass and who you can accost and who you can drum some charges up to take them in. I saw a video that was posted a couple days ago, and some New York City officers were talking about this. Now, I've seen growing up, in Brooklyn, I saw officers harass people trying to get them on something so they can take them in. I did see that happen, and I know it does happen. And is there a racial element to that? There probably is. There probably is. I cannot say what someone's motives is, but let's just say for sake of argument it is. Even if there is a racial motive behind that, there's still a greater issue. Now, the greatest issue, to keep it clear, is the heart of man. And the only thing that changes that is the Lord Jesus Christ. But since we're dealing with secular laws, then the greater issue is over policing. The police are being trained to enforce and not protect. And to me, that is the problem. And I believe that's what verse 4 was actually going over. So it says, for he, talking about rulers, is a minister of God to thee for good. Right? So to the person that's abiding by the law, this is a person that's here for you. That we're for the law-abiding citizen. We are here to protect your rights. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is a minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Now again, to anyone out there, if you feel like I'm wrong, I am not against you DMing me and saying, hey bro, I believe you're misunderstanding these verses, or I believe you're taking this out of context. I am not infallible. But I believe I have a biblical ground to stand on for this. I believe the law should be there to protect the law abiding and only enforce in cases when somebody is doing wrong. And I believe the problem that we've had in our police force is they are being trained to enforce. And they're being trained that way for everyone, blanket across the board. It doesn't matter who it is. Your job is just to go out and enforce. That shouldn't be the focus. And I believe even if we defund every police station, every police precinct, every police bureau, and we replace that with community policing, I believe we will have the same exact problem if we train the same exact way. And don't be so convinced that if you defund the police, that magically they're going to be trained right. As if we forgot that police units, police stations, police chiefs, police officers are made up of humans. We're all human. And as I said in previous videos, if these riots have showed you nothing, it should have showed you that what we all have the same wickedness in our hearts. We all have the potential for the same wickedness. So unless and until the way officers are trained, in my opinion, is changed, nothing is going to change. So where does that bring me? I'm not convinced that defunding police will solve the issue. I'm not convinced of that. Now, if there was a mixture of we're going to defund the police because policing for profit is a problem, which I agree, 100% that's a problem. That should never happen. But simply defunding police, I'm not sure that's going to solve the issue. Even if you just went to community policing, like I said, I'm not 100% convinced that that's going to solve the issue. If those police are trained the same way, you're going to have the same results. And again, you're also assuming that everybody that you hire or that becomes a police officer within your community, just because they're within your community, somehow that's going to make them the most righteous police officer ever to walk the earth. I'm not convinced that that's going to happen. And some argue that we should just have not necessarily an organization, but just community policing. Look, that is skirting the dangerous line of different warring factions and warlords. And I know what I'm saying might sound extreme. I would rather have law and order, and I would rather have police officers trained properly, trained to actually protect, and not trained enforcers, not trained state thugs, trained to actually protect, versus defunding the police. Look, if I'm wrong, If you think I'm wrong, if you think that there's a flaw in what I've said, I admonish you. Send me, inbox me, tell me what your position is. I'm willing to discuss this, but I'm not convinced because I've been going over this for some days now. I'm not convinced. Based on what I just told you, I'm not convinced that simply defunding the police is going to answer the problem. I believe it might actually create a bigger problem. But I'm willing to admit I'm wrong if somebody presents to me a well thought out argument with maybe some things that I didn't consider. Stay frosty, people.